Okay, good morning everybody. What I want to talk about this morning will be interaction in visualization. Let me just do the screen sharing thing. Okay, good. So you can see the QR code there quite happily. I'll wait another minute or so as people are still arriving. Okay, so good morning. What I want to be talking about today is intent and interaction in visualization. So what we want to talk about is user intent, so what do users want to do when they interact with our visualizations, and interaction. So what's different about our interactions with different sorts of visualization, and then techniques for achieving good interaction. So first of all, user intent. This is what do our users want to do. So what we think they want to do is some combination of to select, to explore, to reconfigure, to filter, to abstract or elaborate, so more or less detail, and we want to learn to make connections between different things. So, selection or focus. So here we are looking at marking something of interest. So what we're doing is selecting some sort of detail from a large data set, and we are marking it. Okay, so it's easier to show with photographs and maps. So look, here we have an image and we have marked something of interest. Okay, in this case we've drawn a little line around it and stuck an arrow out, saying, oh, is there a hole here? In this one, oh look, here is somewhere we're interested in. Happens to be sort of fairly near where we are, but here's the thing we're interested in. So we put a pin into a digital map. If we've got some collection of points, a scattergram or something, here we are, we have identified something of interest. It may be that this is a point that is of interest to us, and we're interested in what is its relationship to other points, other observations, whatever they are, and because of that we want to identify that so it's easy to see what our reference point is. We might want to explore, so to see something different. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're saying we've got some sort of information space and we want to move around it. We want to see what the data is in that space. Okay, it comes from maps and so on, but it works very well for 3D data. So we have some sort of data, and if you like, this is where, as we develop it, we think, okay, this is immersion, this is the use of, or can lead to the use of augmented reality for visualization. So instead of just looking at it on a screen, we are actually putting ourselves in the data. So if you think of some great data cloud, and if we've got our points in our data cloud suitably labeled, described and visualized, then we could imagine putting ourselves into that and moving around that data space. So it doesn't have to be just a physical space that we're trying to emulate with virtual or augmented reality. It can be a data space. And this has been most developed in various scientific areas where, oh look, let's try and explore how molecules are behaving. Let's sort of pick up the molecule and look at it from various. And so looking at the thing using some sort of augmented reality or 3D display with appropriate controls. Now, I think 3D with appropriate controls is probably the better bet for most things, even if you've got augmented reality available. One of the problems with augmented reality is that because you're completely in it, you're detached from everything else, then it becomes difficult to have that distance to think, what am I doing? You're doing the exploration and, if you like, recording and reflecting on that, and figuring out what's really important becomes more difficult. Whereas that bit of distance when you've got screen and viewer, I think very often helps. The other one with augmented reality or virtual reality of most sorts is that because you've got a dissociation between your apparent movement that's coming through the augmented or virtual reality and what your ears are telling you, then you tend to get all sorts of unpleasant effects. They vary largely from person to person, but they're really quite common. So I think augmented reality has a place in this exploration, but to be used carefully. Right. Okay, so we might want to reconfigure to rearrange the data. We've shown it in some way, and we think, oh yeah, it would be good to see it in some different way. We want some different view of it, some different perspective. So what are we going to do? So here we have on screen quite an old project, but really quite a nice one, and it's showing films and their rating, their budget, their genre, when they were made, and so on. So if you like, a visualization of something like the Netflix catalogue. Okay, now a more interesting one, I think, a current one that's on there, is dietary supplements. I say visualizations of things like the Netflix catalogue not terribly interesting. I say partly because you know, the Netflix categorization isn't at all bad itself. So it is difficult to see what the value added is, I think, with these. I think if you're looking for more insight into how films are made, then it's not really quite enough, because you're basing it on the rating somehow, budget, genre. Yeah, are you just looking at Hollywood cinema? Are you looking more widely? What's in there? What does that budget mean? There's all sorts of questions getting in. I think there are nice things to be done there, but they need much wider and much more diverse sets of data. Okay, so dietary supplements. Now I will attempt to break out of the presentation when it allows me to, and if I'm lucky, I will put, where's that gone to? Okay. Right, okay, here we go. Is it that one? No, it must be, that's it, okay. So, ooh, it's gone. So here we go. Let's go full screen on that. Okay, so trouble is every time you resize the screen here, it redraws. Okay, so here we've got evidence for various things which are alleged to be good for us. Um, Bring your own prejudices quite happily. Personally, I'm quite happy to see coffee at the top of the list, but others may disagree. So calcium, vitamin D. So what we've got here is a visualization which shows us what things have got strong evidence for being good for us in various certain specific ways. So coffee, fish oil, okay. Feverfew, well, if we click on feverfew, it'll tell us all about it. So we can drill down. Okay, we can go back. So it's telling us what the evidence is. The smaller ones, it's not mouse, that's better, it is mousing over. So Hawthorne improves. So again, it's showing how strong the evidence is, how large the effect appears to be. There we are, and what it is with links through and so on. Okay, so we come down, and then very helpfully in the middle of it, there's a worth it line. Right, so this is okay. Things below here, things above here might be worth looking at. Things below here, probably not. So we come, okay, so again, you see, you can have things appearing from multiple things. Hawthorne appeared high up as being good for heart things, but for blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, not convincing. But, vitamin D appeared very high up for other things, but for diabetes, it's way down here, ditto, ditto, ditto. And vitamin D for cancer. So by the time we're getting down to the bottom, we are finding things which really either there's no evidence for, or they're sort of harmful. That one's not going to show us very well. So pick an orange one. Okay, right. So these are things that may or may not work. So there we are, and it tells us more down here where it's been updated and so on. So lots of interesting things that we can do with that. Okay, right. So if we resume our slideshow. Right, okay. So we can have different ways of encoding things. So the ways we encode things may vary, right? Okay, so here we're looking at examples where we're changing colors, shapes, the orientation of things, the scales of things. We've seen some of that. We can see how we might change the representation. So here from a year ago, we've got social media platform users, and you can express it as a pie chart. That's fine. You get something from it. My feeling is that if you actually represent it as a bar chart, you get more for it from it, because I think the dominance of Facebook, which yeah, you can see it's the biggest, but it's not entirely obvious that it's really going to be dominant. Whereas express that as a bar chart, and I think its dominance comes over rather more. Okay, and I think as well, if you take into account notions of market share and dominance, so you normally reckon about a third of the market share, you're actually dominating the whole market. Okay, so the economy, the economists will correct me and elaborate on that, I'm sure. Okay, so we can do all those things, and again, it's the message that the way we represent something will influence how we see it, the messages we see in it. So I think if with this example, if we look at the bar chart, we think, oh look, yeah, we've got essentially three sites which account for half the usage, and then you've got a decline from there. And if you wanted to make that sort of point, then the bar chart, the pie chart would be the way of doing it. But if you want it, so there's your top three. And yes, you can see that you've got the, if you like, the top three, the next three, and then you're almost going off into the tail of, or what is a long tail. And if you had lots more in there, then the end of the pie chart would be messy, but it would show you've got lots and lots of little things. You can do similar things with primary languages of the internet, what or internet users. So what pages are written, what languages pages are written in, and what are the primary languages of internet users, and you get that sort of similar long tail. So what are your messages? What's the story you're telling here? Okay, so abstraction and elaboration. Some nice things here. Okay, so seeing more or less detail. So here, for all sorts of things, taking a spatial view of it, the Eurostat server, and basically this has got huge numbers of European statistics in it, and you can select what you want. You can look at all sorts of things. It's changed slightly now from this version, and I'll show you as we wait. Right, okay, and we don't want snake oil anymore. We want that. And okay, so the difference between Eurostat last year and Eurostat this year, obviously, is that we can see the UK is not in. The UK actually has, as you can see, a relationship with the EU now weaker than that of Turkey, equivalent to that of Serbia, and points east. Anyway, interesting. Okay, so what the important thing is here, okay, we've got some introduction. We are looking at people. So if we think, oh, look, what we want is people in society. And what we're looking at here on this particular map is the relationship between those over the numbers of people over 65 and the numbers of people in the 20 to 64. So what's the ratio of the over 65s to 20 to 64s? And you can see, again, it may be no surprise, but you can see what essentially it's a measure of the aging population, if you like. We can think, oh, what else might we want to see here? We can see the population. We can see the population density. We can look at life expectancy, fertility, all sorts of things. Okay, so what we've got actually is a very easy to use way of selecting a lot of interesting data. Okay, obviously, it's a map, so what can we do? We can go in, we can see it in greater detail. Wait a minute. Yeah, okay, we can get help, we can do all sorts of things. I think we can look at the data somewhere, all sorts of options and so on. So we can see lots there which is of interest to us. Okay, and we can change the level we're seeing. So we can go from continental level down to district level. So we can, right, so the scale. Oh, this looks quite interesting at a district level. If we move out, what does it look like there? Okay, and what's going on here? What are these little bits doing? Obviously, these are cities of various sorts. Okay, so coming back to our lecture. Right. Okay, so we can filter things. Um, I'll leave this one. I have got the slide up, but essentially this is UK crime statistics. Um, all recorded crimes are assigned to little areas, and we've got the numbers of crimes. You can drill down, you can see what sorts of, how many crimes of what classes and so on. So you can get really quite detailed stuff out of that if you want. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can pick nationally, you can pick all sorts of different areas and so on. Okay, so again, what's nice about these sorts of visualizations is that they don't really need very much prior knowledge to be able to drive them pretty well. And that's really quite important. Okay, so it's not as if you are going to think, oh no, if I want to make any sense of this, I've got to do an hour's training, and have I really got an hour? Do I know that it's worth an hour of my time? Am I going to get the value out of it if I invest that time? Whereas starting like this, you can think, oh yeah, and you may well think, okay, and now there are other chunks of it which need a bit more investment of time, but I've already seen that it's giving me a good return in terms of what my knowledge and understanding gain for the time and effort that I'm putting in. So we might want to show links between items, and this is interesting. So obviously one of the big things we are trying to do is to show the links between various sorts of things. Crime, okay, if you're interested in buying a house, the crime statistics might be quite nice, because ideally, if you're going to move to an area with lots of burglaries, you want to make sure you've got good external security and so on. Yeah, okay, fine. It's useful, but not very informative. If you said, oh, but look, I'm interested in why have we got loads of crime in these areas? Why not? What's going on? It might be that you then say, okay, what do we think crime's related to? It might be related to poverty, deprivation, so on. So if you tied up those two, what happens? Okay, now here we have the OECD. This is its Regional Policy Explorer. Now I put this slide up because this thing allows you to make all sorts of connections between all sorts of things, but it was ferociously difficult to drive. Okay, this was one where you really needed to have spent, you really wanted a morning's training course before you started using it. And you change one thing and it changes in all the graphs, and you think, okay, yeah, this is great, but what's it really telling us? So it didn't work very well. Well, although in terms of visualization software, it's a it's a bit of wonder, as a way for the people who are really interested to get useful information out. Not very good. And I think what was going on here was that the people who put this together were trying to provide, they said, oh look, we know that the people who use this data are interested in all these things, so let's put them all into one and do some really clever software engineering and visualization and link everything together, and look, isn't it wonderful, isn't it whizzy? But in doing so, they thought, okay, like it's an engineering or design tool, a very impressive little thing. But in terms of, does it deliver useful stuff to our users? The answer, not really. Okay. It is actually very difficult to look at this and understand what's going on. So when I said this is now defunct, a year ago it was there, now it is not there. And what OECD have done instead, they said, all right, let's strip this back. Let's say that actually the people who are using this data are quite capable of looking. We'll give some nice, simple, basic histograms, graphs, whatever. But after that, here's a link. You want the data? Get it from there. And by doing that, they're saying, okay, we are not going to try and use sophisticated tools. We are going to make it very easy for you to have a quick look at any of the data we've got and to get your own copy of it if you want. Okay, so it's saying, let's go back to the basics. Let's think, what do our users actually want? And my guess is that behind that was some sort of user exercise. What do people really want to do? What do they find useful about this? What isn't helping them? What's not helping them? So our regional explorer gives us multiple views of data, selecting or highlighting. One is complex, as I said, and that text-based selection system. Although visually it doesn't look like very much to start with, if you're going to invest the time to get any value out of it, then it's going to work. It's going to help you a lot. Whereas the previous data visualizer allowed you to see something that looked visually impressive to start with, but actually making sense of it, gaining understanding and knowledge from it was very difficult. Okay, so series of simple visualizations and side-by-side comparisons. That really, over the last 2 years, that's been a major trend. Okay, and again, comment, user needs for large data repositories are very variable, and it's better to provide an API than to try and do it for them. So great. So again, an EU example, again, very large data repository, and what we have here is something from the European Environment Agency showing production of greenhouse gases and so on. And what we've got is a standardized set of graphs showing the major trends, and we can select the things we want to see. Okay, so this is the default select 5 things that it thinks are important. You can have them all. How many of them are? Sorry, yeah, all is 1,290. So 1,290 data sets here. You can see simple visualizations of any of them side by side. So you select the ones you want, and you've got, if you look here, you've got standard sized boxes, and you select the things as they go, and it gives you the things you want in the number of boxes you want. This is really a very nice abstraction, okay, because it allows you to make comparisons quite easily using appropriate measures, appropriate representations of each of the data sets, of each of the characteristics you're interested in. And you say, oh no, I don't want that one. I wonder what happens. So if you like that, what's going on? How do we explore? Is this related to it? How do these things relate to what I've got on the screen? And so that works very well. And I labour this one somewhat because next week we'll be doing something that looks a bit like this, rather simpler. Okay, so I want to talk a bit about interaction versus representation now. Okay, so the title, Interaction Implies Exploration. So what we've had is the notion that we are selecting things, we are choosing things, we're choosing to see things, we're choosing not to see things, and we are doing that, and we're exploring. We're seeing what's going on. Okay, now we can put that on a continuum, right? So at one end we've got analysis and exploration. So if you think about it, first thing we do with any data set, we see, what does it look like? What's the distribution? So you're looking in the first instance at simple histograms, pie charts, or something like that. You think, great, okay, I can. What is the simplest way I can look at this that might make some sense, just so I get a feel for it? But what does the data look like? That sort of go and sniff it, look around it, kick the tires, essentially. So that's that initial exploration. Okay, that's great. So we're doing that. That's fine. Now we can see, what's the relationship between that and so that's those side-by-side comparisons become really interesting. So that's what we're seeing there. And then we think, okay, we want to just look at bits of this. So we want to filter stuff out. Now we want to reconfigure because, okay, we've seen it this way. Now we've seen it's a pie chart. We can see there's something going on, but maybe if we represent it as a bar chart, then we're going to get something better, or vice versa. So we're starting to see what the story might look like. And as we're moving along this continuum, okay, here we're starting to talk for the first time what the story might be. So what's the encoding? What are the levels of abstraction, elaboration? So which selection? So as we move along, we're moving from that, I wonder what's going on here, to communicating and explaining. Okay, so at the one end, what's going on? At the other end, here's a story about what's important. Okay, and that story about what's important this is what you can see and nothing else. It is very much, here's something which should help you understand and be able to deal with and react to this data appropriately. Okay, so again, it's the story, but it's got to work. It's got to be a good story. It's got to be convincing. It's got to be, if you like, well argued. So in other words, well supported with appropriate visualizations, allowing people to explore around it and think, oh okay, yes, there is something interesting there, or I don't quite see it like that. Okay, but in doing that, in constructing some sort of narrative, you're structuring it. You're helping people understand and come to their own understandings. Okay, so if you like, a good data narrative, good visualization narrative says, here's a route through, but you can go and do what you like around it. If you think it might not, or you want to have a look at this in a bit more detail, go for it. Okay, so it's not trying to constrain people, it's trying to guide people and show them what you think. Okay, so what does interaction bring? So far, in what we've been doing, particularly in the labs, we've been thinking about static visualizations. Okay, so static visualizations, what have we got? Well, we've got a bunch of data analysis. Okay, and if I think you'd say you characterize us as a group as coming out of a data analysis background. Then you've got the world of graphic design. And we've seen so far all sorts of ways in which bits of graphic design are helpful to us and good, but there's huge amounts which aren't. Okay, so what we're looking at then is the intersection of graphic design and data analysis. Fine, that helps us produce good static visualizations. That's the space we're operating in. Now, if we add interactivity into that, what have we got? Okay, so our interactivity, user interface design or user experience design. Okay, so here's our UI UX world, and where we have it interacting with the graphic design, we've got our interaction design. Where it interacts with data analysis, we've got exploratory data analysis, and where all three overlap, we have this interactive visualization. Okay, so I think I would characterize us as being mostly in this space, but also in this space. Okay, if you think of the stuff we did in the first week with Excel, saying, look, here's some data, just have a quick look. It doesn't need to be very slick. It's Can we see something interesting here? Can we show that quickly? Okay, so there we were doing very much exploratory data analysis. And yes, we were trying to communicate what we thought was interesting for it, just to show that we really had explored and found something interesting. And we did. So if we think about those three and the intersections, we understand what's important about interactive visualization. Okay, so why do we need interactivity? Static visualizations may not be enough. If we want to vary scales, if we want to do more exploration, if we want to do learning, if we want to do storytelling, we need interaction. Okay, we live in an interactive world. We expect things to be interactive. So for some of these, if like the storytelling, we can do it in other ways, but actually using interactive techniques to communicate our visual insights into the data is much more engaging and gives us richer or more interesting stories. Trying to vary scales statically gets really difficult because you have to make decisions about which scales you're choosing to represent. And for any given reader, viewer, then there's going to be scales that they're interested in and a load which they're not interested in. So you end up with this, I'm not interested in that, blah, blah, blah. Where's something I'm interested in? So it doesn't work well statically. Okay, so let's have a look at scales. Right. The key issue here is that no display medium can display infinite detail. Okay, we can see whatever we're looking at, let's call it a screen, it is a window onto something larger. Okay, we can only perceive something within that. We can see a bit of it at some certain scale. We might want to vary the scale, we might want to change the bits we're seeing. So we want to see at different scales and we want to see different parts that are of interest. Most obvious, easy one, scrolling. We are used to seeing documents on screen, we read them and we scroll up and down to read them. Okay, that's fine. So if you like, here's our screen. It is a window onto a larger document. And we can move up and down. And that's what we can move in one plane and that's it. Okay, if we're panning, we've got our larger thing, and rather than just moving up and down, we can move around in any direction. Okay, so here we have a large map, and here is the little bit we can see at the moment. Okay, so scrolling and panning are ways of giving us windows onto larger things. The problem we can have is that in the default formats, they don't give us any very useful aids to navigation. Okay, if we look, okay, this version is scrolling on screen. It doesn't tell us anything about where we are in the document or anything useful like that. Okay, yeah. You might, if you're lucky, have a scroll bar at the side, but again, it's a bit minimal. Here, okay, what do we know? Well, well, for maps, we expect north to be at the top. Now, that is a relatively recent universal convention. Certainly, well, something I picked up a couple of years ago, a map, a late 18th century map of Norfolk with west at the top. So wait a minute. So and actually, it was interesting. It was when I got it, I could see that's what it was, but it was advertised very differently. It was advertised as part of Norfolk because it had been the person selling hadn't realized that it had been turned round. Anyway, end of aside. So map conventions north at the top. And again, if you think of some of those very early things that I showed you, there are other ways of doing maps. The documents, we expect things, we read, we have the flow from top to bottom. Okay. But we're not changing the scale at all. Okay, so we're just saying we have this thing, we're moving around on it. Right. Okay, so we want to explore. We want multiple scales. We want to see more or less detail. And you think of the visualizers I showed you a few minutes ago, they're exactly that sort of thing. So often we want detail in relation to a larger picture or more detail of some area of interest. And you think about what I was showing you, we could see the big picture, we could see scale. We weren't seeing both at once. Maybe for that it wasn't important because we knew we could scale out again, scale back in again. But for other things, it may be more important to see them both at once, to see the one in context in the other. So for some things, we want an overview plus detail. And if we look here, is a document, classic PDF viewer. What have we got? So down the side, we've got a series of thumbnails showing the thumbnails of the individual pages, highlights the current page, and we can see the text. So if we had a scroll bar over here, it shows where we are on the page in the document, and we can see where we are in relation to other meaningful units of the document, which happen to be pages in this case. So, oh look, actually, yeah, okay, we're here, and what's that diagram about? So we can look, we can see where we are, we can see where we are in context. So it makes it easier to say, ah, yes, I'd quite like to go and check that bit, or I can see this might be interesting. Can I flip forward and go and find a discussion on this? Okay, so that overview helps us navigate around the document. A question?
So you have to consider all of them for a web page or a paper?
So we're here, we can't do this on paper. We cannot do it on paper because, okay, the nearest we can get with paper to this is a book or a document with a table of contents. Okay, and again, that's not so easy because we're here, we in our book or paper, okay, and we want to go to have a look. We need to keep remember where we are, and we've got to go and find the table of contents again, scan down it, find the thing we're interested in, go and have a look at that, then come back. Now, by comparison, the standard PDF viewer is a lot easier to use than that. So, interactivity works really well. Okay, there are ways you can do it which are better than others, but that's fine. Okay, so one of the areas where overview and detail becomes very important very quickly is if we're looking through a series of images. Okay, so here we have a view of a folder, a directory full of photos, and what this view is doing is showing us the photo that we have selected in most detail, the main image, and it's showing the adjacent images slightly smaller and in less detail, and the further you are away from the current image, the less detail you have. Okay, so by the time you get out here, you've only got little bits of stuff. So if you knew the collection, you might be able to do something. But as you scroll through, so you can use, in this view, you can use the arrow keys to scroll through, or the mouse to just select, and you see the adjacent things. So as a way of, if you've got something where related things are together in a collection, it's a good way of highlighting one and seeing the most closely related. In this case, I think it's just date order. Not very interesting, but there we are. It helps for some things. Okay, so another way of doing overview and detail. Here we have a set of a timeline for developments in visualization. Okay, and again, we can drill down into these. Okay, again, I'm looking at the time, I'm not going to drill into that one. But you can see that if you've got them categorized, you can see the years here, you can see other things. So you're looking at a window with some detail into the overall thing. So if you like, the color density in these rectangles is giving us some idea of the amount of development in visualization within those time periods. Okay, and we come and have a look at the detail. We're saying, oh look, in this period, all sorts of interesting things going on. Lots of activity. What was being discovered? What sort of advances were being made? Okay, and then of course, if we're looking at the history of visualization, we might say, okay, so what are the needs driving this? What are the technologies enabling it? If we want overview and detail of the map, here we are. So we've got this OpenStreetMap's view of us here. We're somewhere in the middle of this lot, and UEA highlighted. So there we are. We can make that clearer. Okay. So here, at the expense of obscuring a little bit of detail in that triangle, we are showing very clearly where the detail is coming from. Okay. So that's a sort of navigation issue. Now, the issues we have with overview and detail levels is design stuff. How much distance should there be between the levels of detail which we show? Okay, how much do we show in each level? So how close should the levels be? How much do we show in each level? Okay, how do we make it clear how we get at the detail from the overview? So if you think about that history of visualization timeline, okay, let's go back to that for a moment. You can see from what's going on here that your instinct would say, oh look, if I go and click somewhere else, I'll get that bit up. Okay, so we're used to the conventions that the bit being displayed is highlighted, the rest might be clickable. So what most of us would do would be go and click somewhere else to see what happened. And that in that case will almost certainly be right. This sort of thing, not so obvious. How do we do it? What would good mechanisms be for that to happen? Okay, now, so that's the design problem we have there. So for some things, it's a lot easier than for others. And how do we make sure that we can see and make the connections between the different views, the different scales? Again, it's going to vary a lot according to what we're doing, but what we don't want is, I've got something there, I can see it's a little bit, and I've got something there which is a big thing, and I don't really see how they tie up. Okay, so how are we doing? Right, I will talk about the bifocal display and then stop for a break. So bifocal display dates from 1980, and here the idea is that we focus on the item of interest and we have some sort of condensed or distorted view of what's going on around it. So if you like, in a normal display, we've got a linear relationship between the information space and the display space. Bifocal display says we've got stepwise. So it says we've got an area of interest which we are magnifying. So an area of interest, a small area of the information space occupies a lot more of the display space. Okay, and we are keeping the connection because it's linear. It's a piecewise division. So we're not losing sight of what's around it, but we are focusing on what's in the middle. And okay, a fairly well-known example, the MacOS dock. One of the things it allows you to do as you scroll over, then the icons become in the area where you are, the focus become larger. And that's got a couple of advantages. First, it shows you where you are. And if you look at some people's, they've got hundreds of little icons in there. So if you've got a load of icons in there, where are you? And the bigger ones jump out. Also, if we think what we were saying a couple of weeks ago about accessibility, it has the side effect of making it easier for somebody who hasn't got very good fine motor control or visual acuity to see what they're actually selecting. Okay, so it's fine motor control. You've got a larger target to aim at to select. If it's visual acuity, the image of interest is larger. Okay, but it's still in its context. So if you know, oh look, your PowerPoint icon is somewhere in the middle, if you scroll along somewhere in the middle, it'll pop out. Okay. Right, I will stop for a break there. It's 9:53. I suggest we resume at 10 o'clock.